Oh, no. You aren't really breathing that well. Okay, ma'am, don't worry. I'm gonna go get some help right now. Hey, can you help me? Look, I'm a new grad. I've never had this patient before, but she's really anxious. Her pulse ox is really low. Her oxygen's really low. I don't know what to do. Oh, it's just the machine that's not working very well. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Ma'am, don't worry. You're not having a problem. The machine is having a problem. And look at that. You're a lot less anxious. And you're also a lot more blue. Welcome, folks, to The Dim Nurse with me, your host, Blue. Ladies and gentlemen, time, as always, is the greatest asset that we all have, so thank you very much for giving me some of yours as we dive into this episode of The Dim Nurse. The everything guide, let's say, for all nurses at any stage of their career, and the podcast that tells you things that no one else will, in a way that no one else will, so that you know things that no one else will. Quite simply, we release these little pearls of wisdom every Tuesday and Friday. For those of you who have been listening to this very early stage of the podcast, you'll know that the Friday attempt most recently was an epic disaster, and as far as I remember, turned out being a Monday release of a Friday episode. So here we go. Tuesday, as the sun is going down, trying to record and release the podcast on the same day. I really got to get my shit together so that I can have a little bit more reliable release times for you, which I hope to be in the morning of Tuesdays and Fridays, which means I have to get my act together enough to have them ready to go by the day before, in all reality, so that they can be released in the small hours of the morning for you all. We left off with you wannabes breaking your way in through bribery, forgery, quid pro quo, whatever means necessary into your first ever job, and here we are. You have hopefully taken my advice and avoided the landmines of long-term care facilities, urgent care facilities, and outpatient clinics, and have delved into the murky waters of the hospital in a hopes of cutting your teeth into some more useful nursing skills. That's right. So here we go. What now? Well, this is what's going to happen. You're going to walk in very tentative, very terrified on your first day of your new gig in the hospital, and you're going to think, oh, God, here I am. Do I know anything? Should I know anything? Am I going to kill somebody? Should I kill somebody? Well, who knows the answer to any of those questions? What I'm going to tell you is you're going to have a strong desire. Yeah, and if you heard that, that's some idiot speeding down the street of the city in a motorcycle. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that I did take the effort of silencing my phone before recording this podcast, so in one way, we're off to a better start than the previous episodes already. Back to what we were discussing, you're going to have a strong desire to look to the nearest person for help or scream, "Help me!" down the hall, when your patient's pulse ox falls off their finger, because you'll think that they're smothering to death. First of all, don't waste your energy screaming. There's often no one of merit to hear you scream. And you're gonna be fooled. Don't be fooled by any of their gray-haired old wrinklies, because there is no guarantee, and there will never be a guarantee of age and competence. Let me just rephrase that. No, I'm not going to rephrase that. I'm going to say it exactly the same way. There will never be a guarantee of age and competence. And I'll go a step further to say there will be never a guarantee. There will never, ever be a guarantee of years in the business and competence. Folks, this is the entire concept that we'll later discuss about the has-beens. They are folks that have been around a long time. They look very wise, and they can be very intimidating to those folks of like you who are very new and tentative and shy. because you're not sure what you know, so you don't know what anybody else knows either. Let me just tell you that there's no guarantee. There is no guarantee, and there will forever be no guarantee that these wisdomous-looking folk around you are truly wisdomous, or if they're getting by sheer dumb luck or the help of more talented colleagues. We'll talk more about that later. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a challenge to that paradigm. You may find better advice from a nurse who has been practicing for a handful or less years than a nurse who's been practicing 20, 30, 40 years. It all depends on how evolved someone has been over time, how current someone has stayed over time, how invested someone has stayed over time, and have tried to hone and perfect their skills over time. You can be as new or as old in the business as you want to be, and in my opinion, of course it's my opinion, it's my podcast, this makes little difference because you are as good as you want to be. Your title as RN in no way limits your scope of knowledge. You have a scope of practice that is defined, but no one can limit your scope of knowledge. 100%, nobody can limit your scope of knowledge. So you can know as much as you want to know. You can learn as much as you want to learn, and it doesn't matter if you're 17 or 77. So when you get to your new shiny role as a shiny newbie, just be very cautious about what you hear and who you ask for help. And if something doesn't make sense to you, ultimately, you have to be responsible for your own learning. So you have to take notes of what happened throughout the day, take notes of the medicines that you were giving that you have no clue about. And by the way, if you are giving medicine that you have no clue about, you need to leave the field right now, because you can be a day old out of nursing school. That is not an excuse for you to give a medication that you don't know about, because we're in the age of technology. We're in the age of UpToDate and Medscape and MicroMedX and clinical pharmacists within arm's reach. Stop what you're doing, read about it, and then make sure it's suitable for your patient. At the end of the day, you, as the nurse, are the last safety stop for your patient. So, if you say, oh, whoa, that's above my pay grade, I don't know. I give it because the doctor ordered it. I gave it because the NP ordered it. I gave it because the PA ordered it. If you don't know what the fuck you're giving, how on earth can you say it's safe for your patient or not? You are the last person to say, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is okay. This is pretty safe, and this is likely to achieve something. Especially if you are in an academic center, you could have any number of randos putting in orders, including a pediatric internal medicine intern who's in charge of critically ill adults putting in orders at 3 a.m. who hasn't the foggiest idea how to breathe in and out, much less take care of critically ill ICU patients. Or, you could have a med student, you could have a resident who's been awake for 30 hours, you could have a new grad NP or a new grad PA or a has-been NP or PA. You just don't know. So you have to be a little bit less, oh, that's my pay grade, and a little bit more, okay, let me make sure this makes sense. And you know what? If it's a medicine you've never given before, you need to know how much finesse is required. Can you shove it in over 1 millisecond as you look the other way? Or do you need to stare at the patient monitor and make sure your patient doesn't die immediately as you push it over 10 years? Any fool can push something through a syringe into an IV, but what separates the contenders from the pretenders is the why and the how. Alright, enough of that. Back to your day. Write down what didn't make sense. Write down what you don't know. Write down the stupidity that you heard as the day went on. And that what you're going to have to do is under the cover of darkness, which means when you're not working, is research all this stuff and figure out what makes sense and why you were doing what you were doing. And this is going to also help you weed out the fools that try to tell you other things that make no sense or that have fallen out of practice 30 years ago. Alright, so let's talk a little bit more about the help. First off, the clinical nurse specialist. They are designed, or at least were designed, or should still be designed, to be experts, clinical experts in whatever medicine the unit you are in that they are also in is doing. For example, if you are in a oncology progressive care unit, or BMT, or HEMONC, or whatever you want to call it, they are billed as the experts, the clinical resource, the encyclopedia for the nursing care and everything else related for these patients. However, I'm just going to tell you right now, there are 0 clinical practice requirements. 0. We pretty much say, oh, you've done this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe never. No problem. You know, maybe they were bright back in the day, and then they went to school and got their master's or their doctorate degree, and then they're like, well, I've done this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even if it was for just a day, and because they have been in the institution, or maybe they've been in the institution since the first brick, or more often than not, they know somebody, there they are, clinical nurse specialist, parroting this whatever knowledge to the young, gullible newbie nurses such as yourselves, listening now, perhaps. And oh God, who knows what's going to happen there. So there's no requirement, what I was saying is there's no requirement for the clinical nurse specialist to still be actively practicing as a nurse in that specialty at all. And instead of the more useful once upon a time approach of clinical nurse specialists who saw high acuity at risk patients within the unit and, discuss the plan of care with the nursing team, whoever's in charge of that patient, and, taught them about the disease and taught them about the interventions and made sure they understood what's going on with the patient, what they need to monitor, what they should be concerned about, and, raised the level of competency as a result of those interactions. They have now morphed over the last quite a few years, as a matter of fact, into somebody who sits 99% of the time behind closed doors, that writes policies that have absolutely 0 utility in actual nursing practice or the practice of medicine, are 99.9% of the times designed around arbitrary bullshit that affects hospital compensation or that in some way makes them a more appealing prospect for magnet status. That's what everybody cares about. And they don't really see patients. They don't really do practical one-on-one nursing education. They do cookie cutter, have you sit in a round or in a classroom and teach you in a very abstract way on a piece of paper or PowerPoint about whatever nonsense. No doubt catheter-associated urinary tract infections. And that's it. And the rest of their time is spent doing policy shit and keeping up logs of your so-called competencies, which are usually certified by somebody else, like your preceptor. It's morphed into just a policy-pushing, useless entity. Any clinical nurse specialists out there that care to disagree with me or who have fought the smothering plague of policy writing nonsense, you can email me at TheDimNurse@gmail.com and title your email, I'm still real. So, don't scream too loud. No one's there to hear you scream. Those that hear you scream for help are likely not the people you want to get help from anyways. And the best thing you can do for yourself if you want help is help yourself. Take notes. Study that day. Look up the articles. Look up the drugs. Look up the treatment plan. And ask your physician colleagues or your provider colleagues for rationale every minute of the day. Ask why. Why are we doing this? Why did you order that? How come not this or how come not that? What should I be concerned about? What should I look for? And if you have a legitimate provider, they're going to explain that to you, be happy to explain that to you, and they're going to tell you in a digestible format, and they're going to actually know how to answer your questions. And if they don't, they are a loser that has no business being in medicine. And you also know this is not somebody that you can really rely on for help, and you have to watch everything they do like a fucking hawk. It's the blind leading the blinder. So, your help consists of your preceptor, It's a roll of the dice, folks. Don't be discouraged. If you have a young face looking preceptor, you might have won the lottery. Don't be fooled by the gray and wrinkly. They may be hopeless. Open mind. Go in with an open mind. You've got the charge nurse. There's nothing really to say about that. They're just a logistical operations person who has no improved clinical aptitude over anybody else. They're just in that position. You have the clinical nurse specialists. Enough said about those. And then you have the rest of your team. Your team. Your nursing assistants or your patient care technicians may be any number of things in real life once upon a time or currently, or have been a nursing assistant for 20, 30, 40 years. Not that I think that necessarily matters, but they often are seeing these patients a bit more than you as the day goes on. And if they are at all paying attention, they may notice certain things that are relevant to you. Like, oh, as the day's gone on, Mr. Whoever hasn't been, that interactive. And this can mean many number of things depending on the setting you work in. Maybe they have heart failure, they're in low output syndrome, they're not perfusing their brain, and so they're tired. Maybe they're a diabetic person whose blood sugar is so low and they're tired. Maybe they're a respiratory person, they're retaining CO2 and now they're tired. So if someone is telling you something like that, even though it may seem like a casual observation, process that through what is wrong with your patient and make sure that you don't need to see that patient to prevent doom. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going away now. Thank you very much for listening. You've been a very attentive audience to work towards. Take care. And if you're going to work, if you're going to school, whatever it is you're doing, hopefully you're a little less dim.